I'm Maureen Ballatori, and this is Spilled Salt, a podcast on the thrills and spills from the food, beverage, and agriculture industries. Today's guest is Sarah Hartmann. She has started Vêsucré, which is a woman-owned company crafting delectable plant-based desserts. And I can tell you, I have eaten this. It is delectable. It's absolutely incredible. The company's signature product, which they're calling a plant de creme, and Sarah talks about that on the podcast today, about why they call it that. It's a single-serve, creamy frozen dessert made sustainably by individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I've been involved with a number of organizations that serve IDD individuals with developmental disabilities, and it's such a special way to build a brand in sustainably and in a just a well-rounded way. Sarah talks about that, of why she made that choice, how she's incorporated that approach into the business, and most importantly, why I wanted to bring her onto the show in the first place is to talk about what it's taken for her to start and scale the brand. Enjoy the conversation. Hey there, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing well, Maureen. How are you doing?
So good. Great to see you, and very pleased to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for agreeing to jump in.
Oh my gosh, thanks for asking. I love talking to you, and now we get to do it on a podcast.
I love it. Well, as I said in my email inviting you to join me today, I love an opportunity to talk to a founder about what it takes to start and to scale a CPG brand, because there's just so much complexity to it. And so I'd love to, before we focus on that, I'd love to back up. And I always like to talk about the history of your career leading up to what you're doing now. So start there for us, if you would, about your career leading up to the work you're doing now.
Super. So this is maybe career 14 for me. Most recently, before I launched Vêsucré, I was working in sports and nonprofit, and was working with the Paralympics, specifically the U.S. Association of Blind Athletes, Go Team USA. And that was an amazing job. Some of the athletes are in Paris right now. Actually, I'm loving watching them at the Paralympic Games. But that job is a lot of travel. And I had moved from Brooklyn, where I've spent most of my professional life, with stints also in LA and Chicago and Tampa. But I moved from Brooklyn to a small town in upstate New York called Oneonta. It's in the Western Catskills. I would put it 3 hours north of New York City, an hour to Albany, an hour to Binghamton, if that makes sense. It's actually where I was born and raised, but my parents are of an age where they need help. So I moved from the city upstate and to help care for them. And the Paralympics job just didn't work because I was traveling constantly. So took a little time to figure out what I wanted to do. And a couple of years before that, I had started eating a vegan diet. And I was pretty much in a medical crisis. And my doctor was like, okay, hands up, like, let's just try eating vegan. And it worked really well for me. I was able to get off all of my high blood pressure medication.
Wow, that is wild.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if that happens for everybody. I'm not trying to give any medical advice, certainly, but I'm really grateful that I had that experience. However, I am a foodie, and I could not find a frozen dessert that I liked. And so I got to work in my home kitchen creating a formula, which eventually became our signature product. We call it plant de creme. It's like a cross between ice cream and a creme brulee. It's a single serving cup. It's frozen and creamy on the bottom, and it's crunchy on top for texture. And there's some science that I was able to devise for its super rich and creamy texture. So The things I can tell you about are we make our own oat milk. And that is a big part of our brand story because we are a zero waste operation. Um, and anybody who's made oat milk knows that there's some pulp left over, residual oats, if you will, and we take that pulp and we reuse it in other things. Um, so nothing goes to waste in our kitchen. So we're combining oat with sesame, and we sweeten it with dates. So that oat sesame date combination creates this really rich, creamy texture in the plant de creme. I'll tell you a quick story about why that name. So when we started, we tested first salty and sweet, frosty treat. And boy, that's a lot of words
Yeah.
and really confusing. So then we started saying it's vegan ice cream. And at events, especially down in the city, people were like, hold up now, that this is not ice cream. If you told me, if
Uh-huh.
you gave me this in a restaurant and said, it's ice cream, I would send it back. And so, we just really aligned on it's a unique product. And so it needs a unique name, and thus plant de creme. Um, so oat sesame date, um, the flavors we've developed 9 different flavors, but we have 4 core flavors that we sell in retail now. The OG is toffee crunch. So it's creamy and buttery on the bottom, and then crunchy, salty, sweet on the top. And that one actually came to be at my dining room table. I had been, working on the formula, and I had a foodie friend over for dinner, and I was like, oh, darn, what am I going to have for dessert? So I just went in the freezer and I scooped some of it in the bowl, and then I put the toppings on, and we both took a spoonful and went, whoa, this could be something. And literally, like, the recipe has barely changed since that first dinner
So
party.
So tell me more about that, about the product development and how you went from I'm going to play around and make something for myself because I want something to I think I'm going to do this. Like I think I'm going to actually do this. Tell me about the product development through that and your own sort of self-talk or mindset about that shift from it's for me to it's for others.
So I think that evening, that dinner was a really important event on the timeline. Um, my friend and I spent the whole weekend, which was supposed to be like visiting and going to the opera and we spent the whole weekend putting together a business plan. It
Mhm.
tasted that good. And from there, I'm very fortunate that I went to college with a man who has created, scaled, and sold multiple food
Mm.
brands, all in frozen. So
Oh,
I
wow.
I called him and I said, "Can I just talk to you about this thing and whether you think it has any potential to bring to market and scale?" And so I got, maybe halfway through the pitch, and he was like, "Time out. I think you definitely have something here. You've checked so many boxes." And, when I was coming up, some of the bigger brands mentored me. And so if you would like me to be your advisor, I would jump at the chance. And I was like, okay, let's go. So,
Wow.
shout out to Kirk. He's a dear friend, and he's my, Mr. Miyagi, and I'm the Karate Kid, like, or my Obi-Wan Kenobi. He in deciding to create the business, he has been, on my shoulder and in my ear, helping me avoid um some of the common mistakes when scaling, I think. And then has just also been a really good sounding board because I've been able to take my years of experience in business, etc., and
Mhm.
kind of switch it into CPG. which is interesting.
Yeah. And so going back to the work that you were doing in sports and nonprofits, what was your role?
So at the USABA, I was like a biz development, so partnerships, sponsorships, money person. So
Yep.
sales,
Okay.
sales is my deal. Was executive director of a few other nonprofits. Prior to that, I worked at a tech startup for about 15 years and from the ground
Mm-hmm.
up. So I've had put some miles on the tires, working in startups, and that business today is extremely successful. Um, in terms of,
Well, and that's exactly why I always like to talk about the background too, right? Because from that experience that you just mentioned, you experienced scaling from the trenches, and you also experienced with like an executive director role and business development, you're experiencing running the ship. There's not somebody there on your shoulder telling you what to do. There's somebody that you're tapping to advise you as you would, as any successful and smart entrepreneur and business person does, is has, cohort of people that they can tap. And so you went from, oh my God, this is amazing, we're going to write a business plan. And you did that for some time. And then you tapped your friend who has expertise in frozen, which is clutch, right? Like
totally.
frozen there's a whole other supply chain there. There's a whole other logistics channel that it needs to go through. And so that, I'm sure, was critical. Then what happened?
So I got my first commercial kitchen, um, working with a vegan coffee house and bakery, actually. And it was there that I hired in my first intern. And this is another key part of the story. There are multiple organizations in this region who serve people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Um, and so my first partnership was with the organization called the Art at Seago. And
Mm-hmm.
so through state funded programs, pre-vocational programs, employee training programs, I was able to bring a young woman named Gwen into my first commercial kitchen. And together we figured out what she was really good at. She didn't have a lot of kitchen experience, didn't have any cooking experience, um, had a problem with texture. So, when she had the toffee crunch, for example, and had all the crunchy, but she's no bueno for her. Um, so she actually developed her own flavor. Our milk chocolate is Gwen's. She did a beautiful job with it.
Oh, I love
Yeah, it's
that.
just super smooth and creamy. And so I knew that at this stage in my career, if I'm going to build something, I want it to be exactly what I want. And I want it to be
Yeah.
sustainable and I want it to be inclusive. And so, now we have 15, I think, different people from not only the Arcot Seco, but Springbrook, and soon Pathfinder Village. Those are all, organizations that are huge, and they serve this incredible population of participants who are having, a great life, but are discovering through operations like ours that they're actually really good at cooking things that, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not just, we're not doing custodial work, like they're doing full on
Right.
food production. So,
Yeah.
um, so, so that was, I think a big part in our timeline that, I got a commercial kitchen. Gwen came aboard. We outgrew that like within a couple of months. And so then,
And was that rented, Sarah?
yes.
Your commercial kitchen was rented space? Okay.
hmm And I also got my 20C from the Department of Ag and Markets at New York
Yep.
State.
And explain for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what that is, just give a brief explanation of what that is, the 20C.
So there's a couple of critical, pieces of paper that you have to have in order to go into business. And I'm going to say right now that I am very fortunate to have an advisor from the SBDC in the office that's here in Oneonta through SUNY Binghamton. Her name is Michelle Caton. And basically, the SBDC for small startups will give you the checklist of things you need to do. So, I would say absolutely the first stop in your journey should be to connect with your local SBDC and then just start that dialogue, because they will also, besides getting you on the right track for getting your sales tax certificate and getting your 20C and getting all the other things that you must have in order to do business legally in the state, they're also going to connect you with funding. And that's one of the things that happened to us, is that when we moved our kitchen into the city of Oneonta, that opened up a bunch of grant opportunities, and we ended up getting a microenterprise grant from the city of Oneonta. So the license that you need as a food maker is called a 20C. You have to have a commercial kitchen. So there's some interesting loopholes that occurred, as I understand it, during COVID, where certain products can be produced in a home kitchen, but certainly not a frozen non-dairy dessert. And so we are required to be in a licensed commercial or commissary kitchen. And so we did that on Market Street in Oneonta for a year. And that was at the Green Earth Natural Food Store. That building is quite large, and it has a whole commercial kitchen and storage space like behind the natural food store. So that was our shop for quite a while. But that grant came in at that time. It funded all of our big commercial freezers. It allowed me to hire Chef Charlie Shaw, who is our operations director. Charlie is amazing. Today, ironically, is his 1-year anniversary at Vêsucré.
Oh, I love it.
Yep, he's great. And he's also a professor up at SUNY Oneonta and teaches in the the culinary program there.
So you're now in this kitchen space, you're renting still your kitchen space, and the micro enterprise grant that you got from Oneonta is helping to essentially underwrite the cost of some of the employees that you need in order to get the product out the door.
Yep, and equipment and packaging and ingredients. There are certain things you can't spend it on, but we would not be where we are without that grant funding. And it is, the kind of thing where it's a reimbursement. So, you have to put the money out, and so we're bootstrapping at this point,
Good for you.
Yeah. So that got us to a place where we are in retailers throughout the state. I would say in year one, our focus was really down towards the city. So that Hudson Valley corridor, Woodstock and Kingston and Akron and Phoenicia. And so, we're getting picked up at natural and specialty food stores. Some of those folks don't have freezers, so there's a bit of a barrier there. In addition to the Toffee Crunch, there's 4 flavors that are our core flavors now: the Toffee Crunch, the Espresso Brownie, Gwen's Milk Chocolate, and a Golden Milk. And I wanted to make sure I, gave an example of the zero waste thing. So we take that oat pulp and we bake it into the brownies that are on top of that espresso brownie flavor. And now that's getting turned into all kinds of different things. But year one was, really about brand building. We know that, our target market are folks who will spend money for something that's locally made, that is sustainably made, that is inclusively made, that, people are very interested in eating plant-based. Perhaps they're plant curious because this is so yummy and creamy and delicious. There's, a small barrier to entry. But we have found that, our product sells the best in metropolitan areas. So,
Yeah.
in year two, we're selling a lot in Albany, Binghamton, Ithaca, Syracuse, and now we're doing a bunch of business in New York City. Um,
That's great.
yeah.
So I want to go back to, you just mentioned year one was focused on brand building. Tell me more about what that looked like for you as that you're in your first year, you've got countless demands on every dollar, right? That it's for people, it's for product development, it's for space, it's for labels, it's for packaging, it's for product, it's for marketing, all of those things. So when you say you were focused on brand building, what does that mean?
So there's multiple answers to that question. If I talk first about the product itself, um, all the dialing in of the formula, the shelf life, um, that was absolutely impacted and improved by our participation at Cornell. So we got a scholarship to
Mm-hmm.
do the Food Spark program, which is their commercialization program. Highly, highly, highly recommend. I mean, at that point when we did it, we were already in market, but it doesn't matter. Like going end to end through that whole course and then getting to go to the campus in Geneva and meet all of the, rock star food scientists and having being part of the Center of Excellence at Cornell continues to be um, a very, like, I just got an email from them this morning. We're going to go up to the lab and do some testing on some stuff and talk to them about, one aspect of our product. But just as an example, in dialing in the formula and determining our shelf life, by doing the Food Spark program at Cornell, we doubled our shelf life. So it's
Mm-hmm.
now 1 year, which is great for frozen. And it actually got creamier, our product.
Mm.
Um, and so in terms of building the brand, we, really dialed in what it is and what it looks like. Um, when we first started, we didn't have a seal underneath the lid. So
Uh-huh.
now we're, very grown up. Um, and that was, definite. Nobody ever complained about that in year one as we're building the brand, but we learned about consumer expectation, and
Right.
and yes, it does actually improve the shelf life, and we're
Mm-hmm.
meeting that expectation, and so that's an example of um, product packaging. Oh my gosh, I thought I would try and save some money um, by creating one generic package and then
Yep.
labeling it, with
Yep.
its flavor. No, that just don't spend the money. Like just spend the money on the specific packaging, because what I learned the very hard way is, number one, I don't know where our retailer is going to place the product. And in ice cream, sometimes it's the kind of freezer where you slide the door open and you're looking down.
Oh, right. Yeah,
So I've
yeah.
got 4 flavors and every lid looks the same on the top.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to move, right? Nobody's going to
Right.
go and pick it up and then here's the thing, because of the lack of real estate for the sticker, they had to turn their head to the side to read the flavor, and it's
Okay, yeah.
something they don't know. It doesn't say ice cream. There's so much education involved, and so
Totally.
yeah, if I could do that over again, it would have taken my time with the packaging
Mhm.
decision. But I felt like, I had orders coming and I needed to get that. I needed to get something going. And
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's such a good lesson for anyone who's listening who wants to start. I can't tell you how many times people have sat on the opposite side of the desk from me and said exactly that. I would love to have one universal package that has a sticker. Now, there are some scenarios where it can work. They're rare, right? And you still have to solve for a number of use cases. And so if you're purpose in that is cost effectiveness, it might not actually be cost effective because even though you can buy those blanks or those standards in bulk, you still have to buy multiple other stickers to do exactly what you mentioned. Make sure that it goes on the top and it's on the side and it's readable. And, it doesn't work for every package, because if yours is small, like yours is small, then you still have to have the real estate to get that across. And if the ingredient deck is different, now it's a different sticker for the ingredients and for the nutrition panel and all of that. So I think I'm glad to hear you say, I wish I hadn't compromised on that, because that's a good lesson for any of the listeners. Because really, what's the goal, right? Is for someone to buy it. And so it's not going to move through the retailer. Your first sale is to the retailer. Your second sale is to the consumer. And it's not going to move through that store if the consumer doesn't know what it is. And so especially for something like yours, where there is a bit of education, well, it's not ice cream, it's different from that, there's so much of a story to tell on that front.
Yes. And so, certainly in building packaging product, one aspect of that, I would say the second is, education and reach. Where are we going to spend our money? And so we invested in this custom designed, it's called an icicle bicycle. They're made in Portland, Oregon. It was such a cool day to have this, our brand colors are yellow. And so you have this bright yellow bike with an umbrella show up, and it's a showstopper. It is a total magnet. And so we decided to invest in that, and it worked really well. And we last year booked ourselves at every event, any event where we thought our market would be, our target market and customer would be there. And then, we thought that there would be enough foot traffic where we could get a feel for take rate and, how many people, when they spent the 3 seconds evaluating whether they wanted this or wanted to try it, how many people would actually purchase. And, I wanted a data set that I could, begin to work from, because that in turn informs what kinds of retailers and wholesale deals and distribution deals I'm going to go for, the kinds of stores, etc. So it was really interesting. Key learning: big boozy events don't work for frozen vegan desserts, because people want salty, greasy. They are not interested. It doesn't matter whether it tastes like the richest French ice cream, because it does. You've had it.
Right.
It's
I have
decadent.
had it. It's incredible.
It's decadent. Thank you.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter if you're tipsy, you want, salty, crunchy, greasy. So we learned that. I mentioned earlier about the event in New York City where people were like, "This is not ice cream. Don't call it ice cream." You have an amazing opportunity to meet people and test things in the field. And so we took advantage of that. We've played around with, how our descriptors. And so we had to get really good at that, because we got to do the fancy food show this year at the Javits Center. And so, by the time we were there, and, our thanks to Cornell, because we did that Food Spark program, they invited us to be part of their incubator village. And that was a huge gift. And talk a little bit more about that later. But my point is, there's education involved with our product. It's hard to launch frozen. Wow, I've learned a lot about that. The supply chain, the distribution, the sales piece. Somebody said to me very recently that frozen is like 25 to 50 years behind the rest of CPG. And
why?
Nobody has, invested time in changing how things are transported. There's still a lot of risk involved. If somebody buys a pallet from us and it gets on a truck and the truck's freezer breaks, who's responsible for that pallet, right? And
Right.
so people are, I have found there's a lot of risk aversion, which, good,
Mm.
but that's not a problem I can currently solve.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say, that was the brand was the packaging, the product, and then,
Yep.
our messaging and
Yeah.
our following.
I I will tell anyone who will listen that the farmers market, and by that I mean any sort of event that you can get in front of your customer, is time well spent, especially when you're very early stage. Because if you had to, instead of getting that direct feedback from people in those experiences where they're standing in front of you, and instead you had to just kind of tweak your website based on what is or isn't converting, and there's ways to do that, right? There's A/B testing. You can set up, various experiences and all of that to understand what's resonating. But when it comes to speed and understanding too, is the vibe of the customer in front of me somebody that I feel like is my core customer that is going to convert, but just doesn't understand it, and then now that they do, they're buying, or is it a curmudgeon,
Hmm.
right? Because your A/B testing landing page doesn't tell you that.
Hmm.
There's so much that you learn from those experiences. And I think also in scaling a CPG and being prepared for experiences like the fancy food show at Javits, where you have an opportunity to get in front of so many buyers, to get into larger retail stores, the more that you can explain and help them understand and see that you're actually talking to your customer, which they can feel from the way that you talk about the experiences that you have in front of people, the more they're going to feel confident that they're a right fit if you feel like they're a right fit, right? So it's such a critical thing, that I think is often like, oh, some brands that I talk to are like, oh, I don't do the farmers market. I want to scale fast. And then we're having a very different conversation, right? About, well, how are you planning on getting that feedback from your customer and all of those things. So you're doing it all right. And actually it's interesting, when you said at the top of the call that you wanted to get out of the work that you were doing previously, because one of the reasons was because of the immense travel. But I was looking at the calendar on the Vêsucré website, where you are at events, nearly every day. I mean, I'm seeing every few days, at least in the month of September, which is what I was looking at, right? Is you're somewhere very, very often. And so what is that like for you in terms of the balance of building the brand and the time that you're putting into it and the time you're spending at these events, and how that differs from travel in a previous role?
So it's different in that, we're in startup mode and still very early on. Um, it it's all hands on deck all the time. My mom and dad do the kitchen laundry for Vêsucré.
Oh my
And,
God, I love
I'm
that.
I'm lucky that Charlie, can hold down the fort here. And let me just describe to you where we are now. So we outgrew the kitchen at the Green Earth, and we're so delighted um, to be invited by Springbrook to rent the commercial kitchen on their Dayhab campus in Oneonta. So this building and this is coming to you live. This was originally a school, and now it is a preschool, but then it's also a Dayhab program for the
Mm.
individuals with disabilities that they serve. And there's a massive commercial kitchen in the back. And so it is luxurious to have all
Mm.
of this space. Um, and then the folks from the Dayhab program who work with us just come down from their classrooms and work their shifts. And, it's fantastic. So,
That's
it's
incredible.
allowed us to scale even further. And now we're at this really interesting point in the timeline where actually later today I have a meeting with Hannaford. And
Ooh,
well,
congratulations. I hope that
thanks. I'll
goes
keep you
well.
posted.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I've learned so much, and our brand is really, the product is in the place now where
Mm-hmm.
we can seriously start to get, case packs into freezers and do things that I've come to learn are essential
Mm-hmm.
for
Yep.
having the momentum in the store, because it doesn't matter if you close the deal. People have to buy it. They have to like
That's
it
right.
and they have to come back and buy it again. Otherwise, you don't get to stay. And there's nobody at the store who's going to do that for you. I've learned it's my responsibility. And so here's where that investment of time and energy in brand building and our language and how we connect with, the customer we could convert. Or I love that you used the word curmudgeon. That was so polite. I have another word which I won't use right now. But we have to do in-store demos,
Yes.
and we have to, get a hang tag, and we have to take a hit on doing, a TPR, a temporary price reduction. And
Mm-hmm.
all of this, information that I have acquired over the past year, we are now hoping to put in place with a big retailer like a Hannaford. We've, had meetings with Price Chopper. We're hoping to talk to Wegmans.
Mm-hmm.
And, the big dance was the Fancy Food Show,
Mm-hmm.
which happened this summer. Charlie and I went. We brought hundreds of samples, small tastes of Vêsucré. We brought a freezer to keep them cold, and we designed, a little pop-up shop. I think I said that, we got to go thanks to Cornell inviting us to be in the incubator village, which for my money was the most exciting part of the Fancy Food Show. If people haven't been, I usually
Mm.
describe it as Willy Wonka meets the Super Bowl. It's literally like
Yes.
4 football fields worth of food makers, and it's where deals get done. The buyers, the
Yep.
retailers, the distributors, institutional buyers, like they're all there. Um, and you hope to write some orders. So we were kind of in the super energized, debut district.
Yes.
And I had a couple of goals going into Fancy Food Show. One, I wanted further proof of concept. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the stores where we're in, our customers, we think we've got something special. And we had to like really make the soundbite quick.
Yes.
We've created this unique dessert that's like a cross between ice cream and a creme brulee. It's made
Mm-hmm.
sustainably, and our kitchen staff are all people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And, just that little sound bite really resonated with a lot of people. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I did meet with Walmart. Yeah, I did meet with Whole Foods. Yeah, like, and on and on and on. Like, it was just, my mind was exploding the entire time. um, really good discussions, and met with several distributors. My goals were, proof of concept, so checked that off the list. Met with several different distributors. So this is, a whole part of the game, if you will, where Kirk, my advisor, was so great. He is king of spreadsheets. And so I continue to dial in my COGS. So cost
Mm-hmm.
of goods sold. That is, how much it costs for me to make 1 unit of the sucre, including the packaging, including the labor,
Yep.
and all of the overhead that's involved. And so, as you get bigger, you can buy more volume of ingredients, which means you're driving that cost down. But then there
Right.
are the margins, right? And so I have a whole
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet where I can look at my margin, where I go direct to consumer, when I go direct to retailer, when I have to go through a distributor, and even if I have to go through a broker who goes to a distributor who goes to the retailer,
Right.
right? Um, that was a whole bunch of calculus that I had to learn. And I'm so glad that I had that in my back pocket at the Fancy Food Show. I knew how to answer some of those tough questions. So I think, this sounds weird because I really wanted to pick up a distribution deal, and I think we're pretty close with at least one that I really like a lot, um, who works, and on the East Coast and New York State in particular, a lot of accounts in the city. But I want further proof of concept. I want to get into
Hmm.
some stores like a Hannaford or more stores down in New York City and prove that we have velocity in the freezer. I've
Right.
got to be able to prove that before I'm going to go and ask a distributor again. This is the frozen conversation. Please take a risk with me, right?
Right.
Because I, they're not going to sell. I'm going to sell. I can tell the
Right.
story, and so I want to be in demand. I think I want to keep it. I want to distribute myself for as long as I can. And the
Yes.
third piece on the fancy food show, and then I'll we can move on to another topic. But I wanted to try and gain some media, and
Mm.
I think that I think it's a valuable lesson that every opportunity, everything you do is an opportunity for media coverage, and you never know who's going to read it or listen
Yes.
to it or see it. And um, so I was super fortunate. So Specialty Food Association produces the Fancy Food Show. They had put out a thing to all of the, gajillion brands who were there. Send us your stuff and apply for a 5-minute pitch meeting before the show. And you might be selected to get 5 minutes with a member of our media team, which means then you could get in front of the 800 members of the media who are coming to the show.
Yeah.
Well, we were lucky enough to score a meeting. It was love at first sight, and first bite. She loved it. Um,
Hmm.
and she decided to make us one of the featured products at the Fancy Food Show.
That's
It was
amazing.
such an incredible opportunity that, to this day, like we're still doing interviews and getting calls off of pieces that have happened, and
Hmm.
just super grateful for that opportunity. And so, yeah.
That also goes to show too that as as a founder, you really it's so hard when you're pulled in 100 different directions. But you really have to have your goals straight, right? And be ready to jump on an opportunity. And so that is a perfect example of if you hadn't had the time because you were too stretched in other areas, you hadn't had the time to fill out the response for the 5-minute opportunity, right? Because you're trying to get ready to go to a show. I can only imagine the things that were on your list in preparing to go to that. And this was just one more thing, but you saw the long game, right? Of I know that if I just do this, then it makes it possible for me to get this, which could lead to that, which could lead to that. And so you have to be able to see multiple steps ahead instead of just I didn't have time for that. And so that's one thing that I sometimes find that I hear from CPG founders of, kind of not knowing where to allocate attention, right? Of what should I be spending my time doing? And so it sounds like you've got that pretty dialed in terms of focus.
I don't, I don't know. I mean, thanks for saying that. I don't feel very. I think being in a startup, being an entrepreneur, your focus. The only answer to the question, "Where should I put my focus?" is everywhere. And you got
Yeah.
to take care of yourself, and you got to take care of your family. You've got to take care of your staff. You've got to have a good
Hmm.
life. And I will pause and say, all of the things I've done in my career have served me very, very well. And so I have to, I'm full of gratitude for, the adventure that I've been on over the years and the things that I've been able to do, because some things come naturally to me, the calculus and all of that. I had to figure that piece out. But, I then, tap on the shoulder of somebody smarter than me,
Hmm.
and I look to people, yourself included. We've had multiple conversations, and I always learn something. I went to,
Mm-hmm.
Grow New York and got to, have lunch with a wonderful round table of people who were kind enough to taste Vêsucré, right? And I was collecting a lot of data from you guys as we're seated
Mm-hmm.
around the table, and how, one person is looking at the package, and then I'm watching them taste it. The thing that I think almost everybody has in common is when they take the lid off and now you have to peel the paper off. It's so beautiful. It is an
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really
artfully
is.
crafted dessert, and very pleasing. And so I love to see the surprise. And then I love to see what people do when they put the first bite in their mouth. Like, there's just this eye rolling,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't expecting that. Like, what is this? And so, now we're at this really another interesting place on our timeline where I want further proof that we can get in freezers and we can turn over. And so there's a lot of focus on the New York City market this fall. We're launching
Mm-hmm.
in the Park Slope Food Co-op the
Oh,
16th of
nice.
September. So if you're in the New York City area, I don't know, when I lived in Brooklyn, I was a member at the co-op. It is the largest member-run food co-op in the United States.
Mm.
So I'm very proud that we're in there because I was a member a long time ago. Um, and we're just a huge, huge sales push. And I will say that, as I look into the future, I've identified some other gaps here, with CPG, and that is, obviously there's a ton of support for us to start up, these incredible
Mm-hmm.
grant programs and SBDC and commercialization programs like Cornell. But then there's this massive step before you are, you've scaled and you've got distribution and you're in the regional grocery stores and then national grocery stores. There's this big jump, and a lot of it has to do with co-packing or co-manufacturing for frozen in particular. So I think I've shared with you, some of our conversations and struggles. I love talking to Polly at Craft Cannery, about this, and he and I were both at an event. I think it was in June up in Herkimer that was produced by Fuse Hub, called
Mm-hmm.
Vitality in the Valley.
Yep.
It was a wonderful event. Our friends from Cornell were there, friends from SUNY Cobleskill and their Institute for Rural Vitality were there. And I
Yep.
had met them early on. We participated in their Entrepreneur Expo and won our very first award, Best Confectionery, product. And um, so a lot of really great, great voices in the room. And, I expressed my experience, which is I'm going to continue to co-pack myself because I can't find someone who will
To manufacture
manufacture.
yourself
Yeah, I will manufacture.
because you can't find a co-packer.
So
Right. Yep.
fast forward, uh, I'm now working on a project concept called the Makery. It'll be based in
Hmm.
Oneonta. One half of the operation is called the Co-Makery. It will be a co-packing business specifically for frozen and refrigerated food. It will also have rentable commercial kitchens so that other food makers can come and develop their products there. And what we're hoping is that both SUNY Cobleskill and Cornell will become involved and do kind of mobile certifications, come down and
Mm.
teach in our classroom and let people get their serve safe, their, license this, license that, do the
Yeah.
commercialization, do the testing, that sort of thing. The other half of the operation is called the Maketeria, and it's a large scale food hall with rentable
Mm-hmm.
kiosks or counters for people
Oh,
who are
cool.
making stuff, in our kitchens or elsewhere. But, if you're small and you're a startup, you don't want to take the risk, nor do you have the funding to do a brick and mortar. So why not rent a counter for a little while?
Yeah. So as you continue to develop that concept, I'd love to talk more because there's other places around New York State that have done that well. One being the Commissary Kitchen in Rochester,
Yes.
that is an excellent model for that, and the fact that they're connected to the Mercantile on Main, which is in the same building, which is all this historic 200-year-old Sibley building in downtown Rochester, and the businesses that are in the Sibley Mercantile on Main, which would be similar to the cafeteria concept, the food service that you're referring to. They are on the really interesting model. They don't pay flat rent. They're all on the same POS system, and they pay a percentage of their sales to that entity or organization, right? Instead of paying flat rent, meaning that they do well as the whole does well, right? And they're also able to make it work, with their numbers and everything. So I thought that was an admirable concept. I think that works for them because they've got tons of apartments upstairs. So they've got like a built-in audience that's already, and businesses that are already coming and utilizing the space. But I'm a huge fan of shared spaces and concepts. And, you touched on economic development too, with the micro enterprise grant that you've gotten. And, I'm sure that there's a vehicle from economic development with this concept as well, that they would love to help because it just is right up their alley.
Jobs for people with disabilities.
Exactly.
That's one of the main goals.
Exactly. Yes.
I'd love to make a field trip up there and go to that.
Yeah.
That place.
Yes.
Very cool.
And I'm on the board for New York Kitchen as well. And they do serve safe certifications, at that, entity. So I'm not sure if the travel makes sense, but just wanted to throw that out there. So anyway, we can talk more about that offline. All that to say, there are immense resources while there are gaps, right, in the ecosystem, surely. And I'd love that you're trying to solve this, not just for you, but for others. Big fan of that. I think that the region as a whole has such strong resources in so many different areas, and the fact that you're contributing to that is incredible. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I look forward to continuing to see Vêsucré thrive and scale. I'm here if I can help at any time, and I appreciate you taking the last 50 minutes to share with our listeners about what it has meant for you and taken for you to get the brand here. And then we'll have you back in 5 years when you can talk about it as a continued success.
That sounds so cool. Thank you so much, Maureen, for all your support and everything you're doing for us, out there in CPG and helping us build our brands. It means so much. And, feel free to share my contact info with your audience if I can be helpful in any way. Please reach out to me. I need to pay it forward. And I think I would just say, whether you're building a brand, doesn't matter what part of this industry you're in, you've got to believe or be willing to believe, and know that it's going to be hard, but it is worth it.
Yeah, and that much better with people in your corner, which I think was also clear on today's chat. So amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Maureen.
Looking forward to continuing to watch you.
Thanks
a
so
lot.
Much.
Thank you for listening to Spilled Salt. I'm your host, Maureen Ballatori. Spilled Salt is an Agency 29 production. Agency 29 is a brand building firm for food, beverage, and agriculture brands. Learn more at agency29.com. For more information about the podcast, visit spilledsaltpodcast.com. Use that website to send me questions or recommendations for future guests. I always love hearing from you. Spilled Salt is available anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.